Meet Reid Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reid is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reid.
This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side, broadcasting to you out of KGAB AM 650, the Town Square Network, AM 780 Denver, and Easy 101 FM in Colorado Springs. Hello, New Mexico, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Colorado. Happy Saturday. Thanks to all of you who wrote in to say that they really liked that Declaration of Independence show last week. I'm sorry I got choked up a few times during it, reading those documents, talking about them. But you know, big, powerful stuff. The essence of us, folks, the foundations of our values, and the building blocks of our freedoms. Even though some are trying to tear those blocks down. But anyway, thank you for that. And I'll tell you, it's been a crazy, crazy week since July 4th. We had the Kindle Daily Deal on the Threads West novels, the July 2013 reprint of Book 1 and Book 2. And then I was on Coast to Coast with George Noory. I love that show. I think he is really one of the best radio personalities ever. And I was on Tuesday night for 2 hours talking about Agenda 21. Have been absolutely snowed under with hits on the websites and folks writing in saying it was just great. They hadn't heard of it before. Thoroughly alarmed, as they should be. And they're checking it out. They're passing it on to their friends. That's exactly what is needed. This insidious grab for our property and our property rights, which are the foundation. I mean, just read the Federalist Papers, are the foundation of our liberties and freedom, aspirations and ambitions in this country. It is dark and it is intentional, folks. And it comes from the UN and the heads of globalists. I want to tell you that the books, since that Kindle Daily Deal, have been continued to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6 bestsellers, historical fiction and Western and romance and Western romance and historical Western, you name it. Over there on Amazon, just been rocking. The print reprint books, in other words, the print July 2013 Threads West reprint books will be hitting the shelves here. In fact, they've been shipped from the printer, I was told just yesterday. So they will be on store shelves soon. The original Threads West Book 1 books, the few that are left out there, are collector's items. If you get a chance, go into your stores here in the next, I'd say, 10 days. And what there is. I'd grab them. They really are. That's it. That's all there ever be out of this huge 33-book series and all sorts of other things cooking on that, which I'll let you know. And then the Coast to Coast show not only spurred the novels, but I mean, we got hits from all over the world, and I talked kind of globally in that show. I'm going to have a little snippet here in just a moment of the beginning of that show, and you need to go to coasttocoastradio.com to listen to the entirety of the 2 hours and the great phone calls that came in from all over the country. I think there might have been one from Canada, don't remember. I mean, there was a lot. But I recommend it, not because I was in it, but because the information is information you need to know. And you know, even in 2 hours, George and I didn't dent the monstrosity of Agenda 21. I mean, it's perfidious, insidious, dark art spear aimed at the basic traditions that we all know. At the real estate, land, you know, I don't care if your house is on 1/3 of an acre in suburbia. I mean, there's some love attached. There's some spirit. Part of you is attached to your property. And they know this, and they want to sever it from you. So this show today, I'm going to play this little excerpt from George's show, and then please go over to his site. I think they charge a little bit to listen, but I think it's worth it, and it's a great site. And he's a great host with lots of wonderful people on there that you can listen to anytime, and he's on late at night. This Agenda 21 deal, we did not get to cover what the document really is, what some of its guts is, what some of the internal boilerplate is, all of which will scare the hell out of you. I mean, I guarantee you. You have to get past the warm fuzzies and the nonsense that they try and cloak it in. All those words you couldn't argue with if you took them out of context of the document. Sustainability and environment and jobs and employment. I mean, just gag me. Because it's just the opposite. And there's been studies in England. We didn't get to go into this on the Coast to Coast show either. But they've done studies in England where this started being implemented by the British just because they don't have the land, they don't have the resources, like 40 years ago. And the results, house prices go up, land becomes scarce, people get out of land and property ownership, they start losing touch with those fundamental freedoms. Employment goes down. I mean, employment goes down, unemployment goes up. It's just the opposite of what these globalists are trying to tell you. So, without further ado, if you want to know more about the Land for Love and Money book, which, by the way, also went to #1 bestseller status after that radio show, again, #1 bestseller at Amazon. You can go to Amazon, Land for Love and Money, or better yet, go to landforloveandmoney.com, landforloveandmoney.com, and from there you can get to Amazon, you can get to Barnes & Noble, you can get back to these archives, you can get about everywhere, okay? And number 2, I want to tell you that book 3 of the novels is on its way to the printer. It's actually at the printer. So that's coming too. I'll let you know about that because, God, I have hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands, but definitely hundreds of emails saying, when are you going to get us book 3? Well, it's coming, folks. It's been quite a travail on that book, let me tell you. It really has. By the way, I'm going to be doing more shows on Agenda 21. Hopefully I'll be back on Coast to Coast or other big national shows so that the word can get out. This is kind of like Paul Revere swinging the lantern. It really is. And I think that there's some things you'll recognize that have been happening over the last year or two, because following this little clip from Coast to Coast, I'm going to replay for you my show from way back in January of 2012 when I first started ringing the alarm bells and almost nobody had heard of Agenda 21. But this goes into the Agenda 21 document itself. You can read it for yourself at un.org if you can get through it without puking. And I suggest you do, but this will give you a really good overview of the document itself. So without further ado, here's a little clip from me and George this last Tuesday night. And I think it's a perfect setup for the replay of one of my 3 Agenda 21 shows on these archives. Please do listen and spread the word, folks. This is really, really big stuff.
Folks, and land underlies everything. It is the food we eat, it's the water we drink, it's the air we breathe, it's the minerals we put into our cars and homes to heat them and run them. So land is everything. And the governments of the world and the United Nations have figured that out because it's the ultimate control.
Well, it sure is. I remember the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson, and there was a scene there where this old man, a nobleman from Scotland, was talking to his son, Robert the Bruce, and he kept talking to him about how important it was for him to get land and title, which is what he would say. So even in those days, Reid, that's what they thought about. They thought about land acquisition, didn't they?
Well, absolutely. And listen, land and private property ownership is really kind of the foundational essence of this country. John Adams said, the moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, anarchy and tyranny commence. Property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. It's a great quote.
I had heard that foreign governments and foreigners were buying up as much land in the United States as they could get. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. There's huge investments, not so much by the Japanese right now, because they have their own set of problems over there in Japan, but China is a huge investor in United States real estate, as is Europeans. Believe it or not, the parking meters in Denver are owned by France.
The parking meters?
That's right, the parking meters.
That's
so
amazing.
It even goes down to those little coins you put in next to the sidewalk.
That is something. Well,
I hope you enjoyed that little clip of George Noory and myself. Many is the night I've listened to his show and his terrific guests and him, because he's great, as I've driven down dark stretches of road between ranches, across state lines, all around the West. And it was an absolute honor and treat to be on that show. I mean, absolute honor and treat, and the audience has been terrific. Almost as good as my On the Right Side radio audience. So without further ado, let's get into this Agenda 21 deal, shall we? Here we go. All right, today we're going to talk about Agenda 21. And if you're like me up to about a year ago, you hadn't even heard of this. Or maybe you had heard it kind of in a whisper on the wind. This is the most evil, the most diabolical, the most complete, utter grab for your security, your property, your wealth, the lives of you, your children, and your children's children that man could devise. Okay, you're going to think that this is a Twilight Zone episode as I talk. Unfortunately, it's not. If those of you who are at a computer right now, feel free to follow along. Why don't you go to Wikipedia and just dial in United Nations Agenda 21. Boy, you could spend 2 weeks reading about it. Or, if you want to get it from the horse's mouth, because this is a United Nations idea. It's actually a very left-wing idea that's evolved over the years, financed by George Soros, that was injected into the United Nations, and because most of the United Nations is rather left-leaning and does not like America, does not like wealth, does not like freedom, they kind of glommed right onto it beginning in 1992, but more on that in just a minute. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention is that I believe, other than the national debt, which by the way is kind of part of this whole program, you know, the purposeful loading of our system with debt, we've talked about that in the past, but this is absolutely the most diabolical scheme that you can possibly imagine, and you need to know about it. I'm going to flash back to last summer. I had heard about Agenda 21 kind of in passing. People whispered about it. They said this, they said that. You know, I didn't really check it out. I kind of poo-pooed it. Oh, you know, people are just getting all riled up over nothing. And then last summer, I had a meeting of authors at one of the ranches in Wyoming. And I started talking to a gentleman by the name of Coleman Alderson, who's going to be interviewed next week. We tried this week twice. Technology beat us to the punch. So you're going to have the monologue this week, which is actually good. It'll give you a foundation, and you'll be set for the interviews for the next 2 weeks, which will also include some elected representatives who had not known about Agenda 21 and now have kind of seen the light. And they'll tell you some scary stuff about what's happening at the local government level. I digress. Agenda 21 started in 1992. The United Nations adopted it, and George Bush Sr., believe it or not, signed the protocol for the United States. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. The protocol is basically, it's 28 chapters. There's about 40 sections, and it's about 900 pages. However, don't despair. You don't have to read the whole thing. You can read the summary that the United Nations itself puts out. That's right, UN.org, Agenda 21. Take a look at it, and you can see how they have everything kind of mapped out for you. The bottom line is that your lives will be controlled. There will not be private property. If you think here in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana that you're kind of out in the sticks and this isn't going to affect you, guess again. In fact, there was an executive order, we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show, signed just this last June 6, 2011, by our President Barry, because he's looking out for us. Actually, Barry and his cohorts, we had the last two shows were on the czars. Wait till you hear about the themes of Agenda 21 and how that ties into the, should we say, belief systems, belief structures, and the promulgation of rules and regulations by the czars. You know, it's a bizarre type of thing. Agenda 21 is very simply this. Number 1 comes Mother Earth. Number 2 comes humans. Number 3, humans have to be controlled by those who know best, the political elite, and humans should no longer live in rural areas. People should be put into urban type systems, compact housing they call it. Sit back and envision the ugliest set of row homes stacked 3 high as far as the eye can see, where you come out the door in your morning of your house that looks like the other 5,000 houses on the block, and you come from your multi-family, multi-structure building, which they've cleverly called compact housing, and you walk or bike to your government job, and then you get your government check, and you get your government food rationing and your government health rationing, all in the name of the crisis that is now Mother Earth. Okay, this is environmental radicalism to the extreme degree. I'm not even sure I can come up with a term for it. The fact that 172 nations have signed on to this, including, unbelievably, the United States, by, unbelievably, George Bush Sr., is absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that it's being implemented is scary. And I'm going to give you some instances here over the course of the show about what's happening at the local level. These people are very, very, very clever. Remember, we've talked about this ain't an accident, this ain't incompetence, this ain't inexperience. No, it's just the contrary. It's part of a plan. It's brilliant. It's as brilliant as it is evil. And these people are going to get it done unless people wake up. And I guarantee you, if you talk to your friends, most of them have not heard of Agenda 21, or if they've heard of it, they don't know what it is. Everybody needs to know what this is, and particularly us in the West. I know there's people all over the world listening to this and all over the country, but let me tell you, we're targets in the West, folks. We're targets. If you don't think this is coming home to roost, I hate to use that quote because of who said it, but if you don't think this is coming home to roost, you're flat wrong. The executive order that Mr. Obama signed, because he's so concerned about us, you know, and he's so worried about the middle class, and he's so worried about America doing well and prospering. The executive order that he signed in June set up the, why don't we just call it a council, and it's on rural communities, the Rural Communities Advisory Council. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Bottom line is that under Agenda 21, there's areas of huge areas of the United States which go to wilderness. All people are moved out of it. All human traffic is moved out of it. All human use is moved out of course, except what the government does to grow your food for you. And the government controls water. And the government controls health care. And your worth is measured by the size of the carbon footprint you leave and by your value. Remember we talked about this with the czars? This all ties in. It's a scary set of dots with very thick black lines between them. And they're getting closer and closer together. Let me tell you about Agenda 21. Agenda 21 started in 1992. In 1997, 5 years after the UN passed it and the United States unbelievably signed on to it, my God, they decided that it just wasn't moving fast enough. No, you know, I mean, when you have a wreck like this, you don't want it to go in slow motion. You want to speed it up. And they had what was called, by the way, the 1997 meeting of the General Assembly of the UN they had a special session, and that was to appraise 5 years of progress on the implementation of Agenda 21, which was originally, it came together at what was called the Earth Summit, 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, June 13th, 1992. Yes, lovely. And 5 years later, okay, in Rio de Janeiro, again, the General Assembly kind of backed another Earth Summit. And what they decided was that progress was, quote, uneven. And they identified key trends, quote, including increases in globalization. Gee, where have we heard that before? Widening inequalities in income and a continued deterioration of the global environment. Gee, have we heard about that before? And they passed a new resolution that promised further action, Resolution S19/2. That led, several years later, to the Johannesburg Summit, the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation. Gee, sounds great, doesn't it? And boy, wait till you hear all the warm, fuzzy terms that these folks thought up so that you wouldn't know. In fact, you might even embrace it until it was too late. We'll talk more about that too. That's coming up. You'll love it. You'll just love it. Okay, the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation. It was agreed at the World Summit on Sustainable Development. Remember that word, sustainable development. It was also called the Earth Summit 2002. I think you have probably heard of that. You probably didn't know the evil that was being wrought at that get-together. Okay, this affirmed the United Nations, our friends. It affirmed their commitment to, quote, full implementation of Agenda 21. In fact, if you do some Google work using really good sites, Wikipedia, the United Nations themselves, they want this plan fully implemented by the year 2025. That's right, 2025. That's 13 years from now, folks. And they want to achieve minimum development goals. If you go to Wikipedia, you can see the links to all these, shall we say, tangents of Agenda 21, and you can read to your heart's content or until you get sick or until you turn to your wife and go, honey, bring me a double drink. All right, then they set up a commission. You know, this just wasn't moving fast enough. And the radical greenies at the Environmental Summit in 2002 in Johannesburg, with the UN backing, all sorts of funding and all sorts of grants, called NGOs, right? Non-governmental organizations. Oh, some of the ones that belong are, you know, like Code Pink and the Communist Party, you know, just little groups like that. You know, they don't mean much. Just rabid, anti-American, anti-freedom, anti-capitalism outfits. Anyway, they had the United Nations set up the Commission on Sustainable Development. Oh, gee, that sounds good, doesn't it? That acts kind of like a high-level forum on sustainable development. And it's the preparatory committee, you'll love this, for summits and sessions on the implementation of Agenda 21. You know, I'm going to read you just one quick paragraph from the United Nations document itself. This is how the United Nations describes Agenda 21. Quote, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that the concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level, unquote. That's from the horse's mouth, folks. That's not from a pundit. Does that start giving you kind of a foggy general idea here? The different sections of this plan. Number one, they have kind of the implementation by member states, and they kind of break that down very cleverly into going, shall we say, sifting the poison pills of Agenda 21 into local governments. In fact, I'm going to give you some catch terms some words that you've heard, that you've seen in your local paper, you've heard on your local radio station, that you've heard at the city council or the county commissioners meeting or in the state legislature. And those words are code words for implementation of Agenda 21. Are most of our politicians in bed with these crazies? No, they're not. They don't know. They don't know. Let me tell you a little segue to this. There's a congressman here in the West that I think very highly of. I mean, the guy is terrific and sharp, and he thinks like I do in most cases, and he thinks like most of you listeners do. He had not heard of Agenda 21. His staff is now researching it now. He actually thought I was kidding him when I told him about this thing. He doesn't think I'm kidding anymore. Most of our politicians, even at the federal level, have no idea of the existence of this master plan for the human race and for the planet, which is being perpetrated by our own government on us at the highest levels. We're talking about Mr. Obama and his czars. Okay, this is all part of a plan. We're going to talk more about that in future shows because the plan has many legs. It has the leg of overburdening us with debt. It has the leg of making sure that we don't have economic recovery, so there's more dependency on government. It has the leg of controlling food, controlling air, controlling water, controlling health. Sit back and think for a moment. If you are healthy and you have health care that you can rely on, if you're not hungry, if you have plenty of clean water to drink, if you are self-sustaining, let's say you have an acreage, if you're armed, that's right, if you have guns, do you think you're easy to control? Or do you think it's easier to control somebody who's starving, thirsty, no income, unarmed? That's not a hard question. Now do you start seeing why all these folks in Mr. Obama's government and some of the people in Congress like Harry Reid, like my friend and your friend Nancy Pelosi, now do you see why they work on all these different tangents and you scratch your head and go, where are these people coming from? This is where they're coming from, folks. This is where they're coming from. And they have the backing of the United Nations. Think back a little bit, just over the last year. How many times has Mr. Obama talked about the United Nations? The United Nations resolution this, the United Nations resolution that, with the approval of the United Nations. We went into Libya because the United Nations sanctioned it. This guy and everybody around him is a globalist. They have all bought into and know about Agenda 21, which has been financed by their financier, directly and indirectly, Mr. Soros. This is a many-tentacled monster. I know this sounds like the Twilight Zone. It is not. It is reality. I implore you, take 10 minutes. Go to Wikipedia, a trusted site. 3 billion humans on the planet go to that site every day for information. It's the Encyclopedia Britannica of the Internet. And just dial in the words United Nations Agenda 21 and sit back and prepare to gag. Go to the United Nations itself, un.org. Just type in Agenda 21. You can read the document or parts of it. You can click on links and follow it to its slimy little tentacles. Please take 10 minutes. And after you do, if you agree with my assessment of this diabolical Darth Vader Death Star type thing, tell your friends. And, as we're going to talk about later in the show, you make sure that your local politicians know about it, because they don't. Next week, when we have this interview called, Coleman is going to be telling you about, and we hope to have several local politicians on with him too. He's going to be telling you about some inquiries he's made with political people on the East Coast who are using the word sustainable development and urban compact and all the buzzwords, fighting poverty. You know, who can be against fighting poverty? Unless you know that fighting poverty means they take away all your property, all your income, everything that you have worked for, everything that is you and America and makes you an American, and they redistribute it, not only within the country, but from country to country. We've talked about that before. You'll find out that most of these politicians don't know about this. They need to know about this because they're being used as unwitting dupes. Unwitting dupes. And they need to get on the wagon, and they need to understand what is coming down from them. Do you remember what Van Jones said? He says it all the time. From the bottom up, from the top down, and from the inside out. Well, this is from the bottom up. They're planting these poison pills of Agenda 21 with all their fuzzy words that everybody goes, oh, isn't that nice? What a great idea. At the local level. Letting them sprout like poison ivy vines in your local governments. And that's only because your folks don't know. There's very few folks that you people have elected that would go for this in a heartbeat if they knew what was really coming down and how they're being manipulated. To get into some more detail on this whole implementation, okay, the structure and the contents of the 40 chapters that constitute Agenda 21, they're divided into 4 main sections. The first section is social and economic dimensions. Gee, that sounds nice, doesn't it? Which deals with combating poverty, especially for developing countries. Remember what the czars said? We don't do enough for developing countries. We're the source of all evil. We cause all wars. We need to pay more. We need to pay higher taxes and give it to the UN. Remember all those things. Oh, and then social and economic dimensions, section 1, talks about changing consumption patterns. Gee, have we heard anything about changing our consumption patterns? You know, calories, what we can eat, what we can't eat, all that kind of good stuff? Yep, we sure have. How about promoting health? Oh, you mean like Obamacare and all the nonsense that goes along with that power grab that's used as subterfuge to try and hoodwink us into thinking that this is for our own good? Oh, and change population. Wow, that sounds like Mr. Sunstein and Mr. Holdren sterilize the water, decide who can have babies, decide the value of every human being, and if you're not valuable, bye-bye. Oh, and sustainable development. Doesn't that sound like the president's refusal to do the XL pipeline, which, you know, just happened like yesterday? Never mind the jobs, never mind the energy, never mind our military, never mind dependence on foreign oil, never mind what's going on in the Mideast. Yeah, he just didn't approve the pipeline because, you know, he wasn't sure it was environmentally sound and would contribute to sustainable resources. There's that word again. Okay, and then we come to section 2. Oh, you're going to like this one too. Conservation and management of resources for development. This includes atmospheric protection. Gee, Al, is that like, did you write this paragraph? Is this like the global warming stuff? Oh, and deforestation. Sorry about the pronunciation there. I'm getting, you know, I read this stuff. I'm going to take a little break here. I'm going to remind you as I kind of get my wits about me and stop breathing hard and heavy into the microphone as I read this stuff and my eyes cross. This is Reid Lance Rosenthal on the right side. EBN Network, Web Talk Radio, KGAB AM, and their affiliates out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And we are talking about Agenda 21, that little poison pill, which has already been injected, or shall we say ingested, by many local governments in the United States and around the world unknowingly. Anyway, we are on section 2 of this 40-chapter document, and I'm giving you a very, very brief overview. This is all on the web for you folks. Please, I don't have time in these shows to go over the details. My job here is to alert you to this, to give you the broad brush, to tie this dot into the other dots we've been talking about and the dots that you do hear occasionally on the mainstream media, because there's people out to change your life, take your property, and destroy your children's future, period. It's as simple as that. I'm not making this up. This is not the Twilight Zone. This is reality. This is real-time stuff that's in effect that these people in writing want to have implemented by the year 2025. And our government is contributing $18 billion a year to the United Nations, the organization which is pushing this with the help of all their leftist friends around the planet. Section 2. Section 2 of Conservation and Management of Resources for Development includes atmospheric protection, combating deforestation, protecting fragile environments. Let me tie that in for you folks in the West here in a moment. The conservation of biological diversity, biodiversity, control of pollution, and management of biotechnology and radioactive waste. You know, that all sounds good on the surface, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, you folks in the West, when you go to this site, why don't you type in biosphere, and why don't you type in World Heritage Sites? This is right in Agenda 21. This is not a pundit thing. Here's what you'll find. You'll find that there's massive areas of Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado, okay, which will affect your town. One of them is right here near Cheyenne, that are going to be off limits to human development, off limits to human use. Okay, they're called biosphere protection areas. And then there's other areas called World Heritage Sites. Oh, gee, that sounds fun, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, they're a lot more sinister than our national park system. In fact, you guys listening in southern Florida, you better start looking for a moving van, because most of southern Florida, like from the Everglades to the sea, is a World Heritage Site. And there's absolutely, I'm wagging my finger in the air, no humans allowed in a World Heritage Site, except, of course, the political elite, because they need to go in there and manage it for the rest of us to save the planet. You know, this has all been trumped up into a crisis. Remember what Rahm Emanuel, the former head of the White House for Mr. Obama, our friend Barry, remember what he said? Never let a crisis go to waste. These guys are drumming up a crisis. They're getting people excited. They're hiding, they're masking their true intent with all these warm, fuzzy terms that everybody thinks is, oh, gee, I could be for that. And then they're injecting those poison pills into local government while the federal government builds its shadow structure with people who believe in this ardently, fervently, ideologically, and absolutely. And over the last 2 weeks, I told you about some of those people. Okay, you can see it on the news for yourself. Then we have the next section, Section 3, strengthening the role of major groups. This is the word they use, major groups. Let me tell you who they define as major groups. Oh, you're going to be really happy about this. How about children? Yes, that's a major group that they have to strengthen the role of. Do you remember Al Gore standing up there a year or two ago and telling all these students, don't listen to your parents. You guys know better. You know I'm right. You know the world's coming to an end if we don't stop all this stuff and establish the carbon exchange market and cap and trade so I can make my portion of the $10 trillion. Oh, he didn't put that in the speech. That's right. He forgot to put that in the speech. Bottom line is, they're after our kids. Okay? Who runs the schools? The unions. Okay? Except where school boards have been courageously elected, which are fighting back against that, schools are run by the unions. Unions are for globalization. Do you remember Andy Stern, SEIU, Workers of the World Unite? I put emphasis on the word world. That's right. They're for globalization, and Agenda 21 is the blueprint for globalization, using environmental concerns as the guise and warm, fuzzy words to lull us all to sleep. Well, if you read further about Agenda 21, you'll see that they admit that they believe that within 15 years, gee, that kind of ties in with that 2025 date, doesn't it? Within 15 years of educational effort, that they can turn an entire generation of children into, they don't use these words, these are mine, mindless automatons that believe in their nonsense. So you've heard on the news and you've seen on the news the children chanting this and chanting that and singing songs and Mother Earth and Barack Obama is God and whatever they happen to be. Yeah, no, these aren't isolated instances, folks. In fact, they're the rule rather than the exception. Okay, your kids are being brainwashed. We need a new education system. We need all sorts of things, and we need lots more homeschooling by people who, shall we say, regard their children's intellect and their children's faculties and their children's opportunities they hold them in a far higher esteem than do the government folks who run our school system with an ulterior motive. Let's talk about another major group. How about women? Oh, aren't you glad, all you gals out there, that you've been targeted as a major group by Agenda 21? That's right. They know that you might be a little softer and a little bit more mushy, and they might catch you with these trumped up scenes and videos of dead seagulls or other things that are totally manufactured or blown out of proportion or out of context. That's right. You're a targeted group. You need to be brainwashed. You should be supporters of Agenda 21. What's another group that they have here? Oh, let's see. NGOs. That's right. Non-governmental organizations. We already talked about that. They're kind of a major ingredient in this whole Agenda 21 deal. Oh, and then we have local authorities. Gee, there's that theme. Plant the poison pill at the locals. Business and workers, and strengthening the role of indigenous peoples. Think about the uproar over the Indians. How we've handled that situation tragically and poorly, all the way since really the 1840s. And community and farmers. Yes, because, a hungry population is much easier to control than a well-fed population. Oh, and by the way, on the farmer thing, think about how the radical environmentalists went into the farm communities in Nebraska and several other states where this pipeline was supposed to go, and started telling the farmers about how it was going to ruin the Ogallala aquifer, destroy their plants, destroy their crops, destroy their drinking water. And listen, some farmers may believe that, and God bless them. You get to believe whatever you want. But the bottom line is, a lot of farmers were manipulated, and they were manipulated on the pipeline under the umbrella of Agenda 21. Because we don't want energy self-sufficiency. We want to keep shipping dollars to other countries. This is all about social justice, another Agenda 21 catch term. And inequality, another Agenda 21 catchword. Not only between individuals, but between nations. Let's take a look at Section 4, the means of implementation. Gee, what do they have planned for us? They plan to implement this through science. I think it would have been more accurate to say the distortion of science. Technology transfer. Do you remember me talking a few shows ago about how Holdren, Mr. Obama's czar, at Mr. Obama's bequest, was shipping our sensitive NASA space information to the Chinese military, and how the head of NASA had been ordered by the administration and had indeed visited China and met with high-ranking space and military officials over there on numerous occasions? Gee, you think this might tie into this technology transfer portion of the implementation of Agenda 21? Yeah, I think it might. Oh, and then we have education. Think about all the uproar in Wisconsin and Indiana right now so that the unions don't lose control of teachers and teachers' dues and political clout. Oh, and then international institutions. Gee, does that mean like the United Nations? Yep, it does. Or how about the International Monetary Fund, who's busy plugging these Band-Aids on Europe? Okay, that we're contributing hundreds of billions of dollars of our tax money at a time we're $15 trillion in debt to. Oh yeah, it includes that, and it includes financial mechanisms. You know, they're kind of foggy. It's pretty interesting if you dig down into this. They're foggy on what financial mechanisms are. I wonder if it's recession, if it's high unemployment, if it's record welfare, food stamp, and entitlement programs. I wonder if it's 48% unemployment in Spain. Well, I don't wonder anymore now that I rattle those off. No, this is all part of the plan. These people don't want the planet to get better economically. They don't want a recovery, because desperate people are more likely to grab onto, shall we say, false sticks of hope. And that's exactly what Agenda 21 is. It's a false stick of hope. It's kind of like following a stick into the mouth of an alligator. Then they have, under implementation, make sure you take a look at local Agenda 21. We were just talking about that, the little poison pills that have come from way, way up high, the top globalists, including Barry and his clan. And in the local Agenda 21, let me tell you what it says. The implementation of Agenda 21 was intended to involve action at international, national, regional, and local levels. Some national and state governments have legislated or advised that local authorities take steps to implement plan locally, as recommended in Chapter 28 of the document. Such programs, that's right, I didn't mispronounce that. They don't spell it program. It's spelled programs, you know? The old kind of Chinese and Russian communist program. That's P-R-O-G-R-A-M-M-E-S, programs. Such programs are often known as Local Agenda 21 or LA 21. If you get a chance, and you're not thoroughly disgusted and retching on the floor after you spend 10 minutes. That's all you need to spend. Looking at this stuff, dial up, and you'll get this on the UN site, the United Nations site. Dial up Chapter 28 of the document, which is the local Agenda 21, how they're inserting the poison pills into local governments. And you take a look at some of the terminology in there, and you will flat recognize it from your city council, your county commissioner, your state legislatures, your newspaper, and your radio in your local town. That's how insidious this thing has become. I'm going to, I could talk for hours about this, but my coming shows are going to have some great interviews from people who know much more. They've been following this for years. I can't profess that I have. And some political viewpoints on this from politicians who were led down the primrose path and fortunately awakened prior to fully ingesting the poison pill, if it were. But in the meantime, I'm going to once again implore you. I know I sound like a broken record on this, but I can't tell you how dastardly this whole deal is. And I can't tell you how important it is that people understand that it exists, that understand it's real, that understand it's in play, in motion, and in the process of implementation, and that you tell your neighbors, that you tell your legislatures, that you tell your city council, you tell your county commissioners, you tell their staffs, you tell your congressmen. I don't think there's any hope for the Senate other than a few of them. But at least, if you can get the word out to these people, even if their staffs go spend 15 minutes Googling the thing and print it out and put it on their boss's desk, you have done yourself, your family, your freedom, and your country a great service. And it's a service that we need to, shall we say, gear up very quickly. Because the other side, even though they are a tiny minority, they are way, way, way ahead of us, folks. We're like looking at their dust. We need to get our little feet moving. Otherwise, their dreams of an utopia, I use that term advisedly, their dreams of an utopia in which we are all like little Ottomans and slaves is going to come true. It's just as simple as that. I'm telling you this because I do this show for a reason. I barely have time to do it. I certainly don't make any money doing it. I do it because I love this country, I love the people in this country, and I love the American spirit. And we're losing it. We're losing it because we're asleep. We have a normalcy bias problem. That's what I call it. Everybody is going about their day-to-day activity, their day-to-day job, all the things that all of us do that keep us busy and preoccupied and concerned and happy and whatever. And we're losing sight of the big picture. And the other side, even though they are a small, tiny minority, the other side knows this and they play it for all it's worth. They bank on the fact you're not going to know about this stuff or you're not going to have time to find out about this stuff. My job is to get the word out. And my job is to extol you to get the word out. Because if you have knowledge, you can act. And if you can act, you can defend America, the Constitution, your rights, your freedoms, and the rights, freedoms, and prosperity of your family. That is why I do this show. We're going to pause right now for another word from our sponsors.
Land. For love and money. The beauty of the land provokes something primal. It fills us with awe and makes us yearn for land of our own. My land. Those words evoke a sense of security and a place in the world. Yet the word land also evokes nitty-gritty financial issues, business, improvement, taxes, profit. In Volume 1 of Land for Love and Money, rancher Reid Rosenthal uses his award-winning style to tell us real stories, the hard-hitting truth your banker forgot to tell you about all types, sizes, and locations of land. For those drawn to land purchase, ownership, management, preservation, and sale in good times and in bad. Reid's intense love of the land, his devotion to wild and remote places, and his extensive experience with land purchase and sale throughout 2 continents make him uniquely qualified to write Land for Love and Money. A bestseller already, Land for Love and Money is available at landforloveandmoney.com, Barnes & Noble, Hastings, Amazon, and fine bookstores everywhere.
This is Reid Rosenthal on the right side. Shame on me, I'm supposed to do that like halfway into the show. I guess I'm a rebel even when it comes to broadcasting. In any event, this has been a terrific show tonight. I hope it opened your eyes. I hope it, shall we say, stimulated your senses. I'm not sure it stimulated them in the most pleasant way. And more than anything, I hope that it piqued your curiosity enough to spend 10 minutes of your life in the very near future and dial up these websites and then tell your friends and tell your elected representatives about it. If I sound like a broken record, I am, because I can't tell you how critical it is that word about this dastardly globalization plan, which is being implemented right under our nose under the guise of warm, fuzzy words that mean entirely the opposite of what you think that they mean. Anyway, please, for you and for your family, take 10 minutes. I'm gonna be going over this Agenda 21 thing in more detail. We just kind of scratched the surface tonight. It's far more diabolical. Even then, I think that tonight's discussion would lead you to believe. I mean, what they are doing in terms of manipulating lives, manipulating resources, manipulating jobs, and ensuring that everybody, if you're up there, gets brought to mediocrity, if you're down there, gets brought up to mediocrity, and that we all live in this abject life of mediocrity in compact cities with the land, the resources, the water, the air, the food controlled by others than us. This is Reid Rosenthal on the right side. Till next week and more on Agenda 21.
For more information about Reid and his work, please go to ontherightsideradio.com. There you can also click to purchase the first 2 volumes of his #1 best-selling historical Western series, Threads West, An American Saga, and Maps of Fate. And now the first volume of his new nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, is available everywhere, or go to landforloveandmoney.com. That's Land for Love and Money. We'd also like to remind you that if you've missed any shows, you can go to the show archives on Reid's ontherightsideradio.com webpage. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Reid Rosenthal on the Right Side.